From the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, JP Shadrick, John Oehser, and General Manager James Gladstone with us. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you guys for the app to sit down.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind for you, clearly. Hired over the weekend, press conference in Jacksonville Monday, flight to Indy, at the podium today, Radio Row. How are you settling in so far? Or is it just kind of a fire hose effect right now?
You know what? It's been a blast. My cup's getting full, but I certainly look forward to not talking as much as I have and listening to the insights from our coaching and scouting staff over the course of this week as we get into the roster, as well as some pro free agent targets, and just engage in the dialogue that's going to bring this all to life.
Now, I got to ask you, I saw the press conference yesterday, talked to you a little bit. Do you ever get rattled, or is this sort of low-key demeanor? Is this just you?
I'm glad that's your impression of it. There are certainly moments. Being a parent,
sure.
The ranges of emotion have certainly
been there,
continued to expand in ways that I didn't ever know existed within me. I call parenting infuriatingly wonderful, and so yes, there are moments that'll show through. But I try to stay as stoic as possible, knowing that emotions can sometimes get in the way of sound decisions.
Got you.
Let's rewind a little bit back to your early days with the Rams and when you crossed over with Liam. And when did you first realize that, hey, you know what, Liam Coen's got a chance to move up the ranks as a coach in the NFL or otherwise? And at what point did you realize, hey, I could make really a career and run up the ladder in the league?
I think that's a fair question. I'll start with Liam in that having worked with him previously, having followed his time in both Tampa Bay and Kentucky, it was clear that, his approach, it was built for the modern game. And really the even more exciting thing specific to the Jaguars is it's built for the current talent that exists on the roster. His offensive philosophy, his marriage between the run and the pass, the multiplicity of the run game, the variety of the screen game, it's going to give this team a notable edge. And I can't pinpoint a moment that I knew that was ultimately going to lead to him becoming a head coach until that was a large-scale narrative and he was finding success. And even for myself, it was never something that my mind went to. When I was a high school teacher and coach, I knew that was my path from a young age, and I was planning on staying that course until the day I died. And, I changed course 3 years in after I met Les Snead. And he was somebody that I was drawn to, somebody that I wanted to learn from, somebody that I wanted to support. And I kept my mind rooted in the idea that I'm going to do this, I'm going to support Les, I'm going to learn from him until that's no longer what surfaces for me. And, I was still at a point where that was of interest to me. And it wasn't until Les raised his hand and said, hey, I think it's time, and let's see if it works out.
In talking to Liam earlier, he was very specific about what a high-end communicator you are. Has that always been the case? Is that something that you work at in your positions in football, and how key is it to be that?
First, it's key and critical. Beyond that, it's definitely something I always work at. I'm always thinking about the way I phrase things, knowing that they mean something. And I also think, football's a really complex system with a lot of moving parts. It helps when you're able to narrow your focus and communicate a message that allows everybody to have a firm grip and understanding for what the expectations are, for how we intend to operate, and what our intended result should look like. And so I've always felt like that is such a key component to finding success really in any walk of life, right? In any partnership. So it's definitely something that I value. And, I think back to my dad was such an influence on my life in a small group setting. I don't think that there's anybody who does a better job than him. And so to emulate kind of his cadence, his rhythm, things like that, it was easy to apply that because I grew up in the same house as him, right? So he was my football coach. He was a guy that I worked with as a coach. So, being around that for so many years, it was just easy to emulate.
James Gladstone with us, Jaguars general manager. 3 weeks to free agency. I mean, that's right around the corner, and then, of course, the draft a little bit further away. But coming into it in late February, how far down the road are you on free agency? I know you've probably looked at it before this process, but and then how do you marry that with the staff that's already here putting the work in on the Jaguars side?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. Now, in terms of the timeline, this is the typical window in which most buildings are having these conversations anyway, so it's not behind in any sense. Really, it's just getting our coaches' perspectives on what they could see as a vision moving forward, or a hole, or something that they want to tap into. And so I think through the conversations that we'll have this week, a lot will surface around not only the players on our roster, but also their vision for the scheme and how everybody works within it, and players that we might need to target that are outside our building already and in the draft in the future.
You were pretty pointed on the podium that, like Liam, you think there's more than 4 wins in this roster.
Yeah.
I guess just expand on that, how you feel about the roster and the prospects going forward.
Yeah, I think that there's the talent that exists on this roster is certainly better than 4 wins, and we look forward to injecting this ecosystem with some intangible elements that Liam and I both covet, and really that's rooted in things like mental and physical toughness, and just elevating the floor of the roster, and at the same time leaning into the guys that we got and knowing that we can put them in some good spots to really showcase their capacity and their attributes.
First impressions of Tony Boselli.
Gosh, I got to imagine that every candidate that dealt with him, that walked into the room, walked out saying, that's a guy I want to be in the bunker with. His passion for the Jaguars, his support that he shows right off the bat, it's contagious. And I can't wait to get to know him better, get to work with him, because there's some real wisdom, support, and security when you're with him.
Looking forward to that. James, thanks for the time. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you both. That was a blast.
James Gladstone,
Fantastic.
Jaguars GM here at the Combine.